And I'm Christine Bentley in studio with the lovely Sharon Caddy, and joining us now is the even lovelier criminal lawyer Marcy Segal, who doesn't always join us in studio, but it's our great pleasure today.
And the pleasure is all mine, and I'm only marginally as lovely as you two.
It's going to be that kind of day, Sharon.
Sounds right.
We're just getting her in a good mood because now we have to talk about some pretty grisly stuff, Marcy. The Luka Magnotta trial, which is capturing headlines everywhere, all around the world, because it just seems, it's bizarre.
Well, it's a bizarre story.
Yes, and I think because social media is so prevalent in this trial, that I think that's also caught a lot of attention. For example, the jury has seen all the video that has captured the deceased and Mr. Magnotta going into Mr. Magnotta's apartment, and then obviously the deceased doesn't leave the apartment, and then Magnotta is wearing a wig and then goes to the basement and starts putting in the body parts.
Yeah, the bags and bags.
The bags, yeah. and then takes such a cute dog, for which he kills later on as well. And then the individual from Germany who had met him on a dating site, who actually turned him in, came all the way from Germany to testify the other day. There's a lot of different angles to this case.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's surprising me is all this evidence about people, a 69-year-old retired naval sergeant who had 6 or 7 dates with him on Rent Boys or something, and said that he was polite and great manners and whatever. And then we're hearing that testimony that he was generous. Does this confuse things? Is this tell us how this works in the drama of the courtroom? How are they trying to play to the jury with all this stuff? Because in the end, does it really matter if you were generous or polite?
You know, one of the biggest concerns I have about this trial, and again, I'm an armchair quarterback, so I'm not in the trial, it's not my case, so, far be it for me to comment. However, lawyers always do comment. My concern more and more as you become more seasoned is how much does a jury or a judge need to know about anybody's personal life? Now, if, for example, the deceased was killed in the course of a sexual assault, then obviously allegations need to come out about not only Magnotta's history, but to a limited extent, the deceased history and what his sexual preference is, because obviously if the accused denies there was a sexual assault and it's a homosexual affair, then I guess it has some credibility. But if that's not the theory of the Crown, then in my view, you do an injustice to the deceased and his family to be littering about the fact that Lynn was a homosexual. Now, don't get me wrong, I really don't care what your sexual preference is. But you got to appreciate the Chinese culture, at least I can see from this trial, very closed, very respectful. This was obviously hidden from the family. And these salacious details really don't need to go before the jury, in my view. And that's one of my concerns, which I wanted to voice this week.
Well, it feels as though, as just someone who's turning in the news and seeing what's going on day to day, I feel like there's a screenplay being written for me as opposed to just the facts being presented that are necessary.
Exactly. However, you do have some amazing columnists that are writing it, and they are seasoned. Christy Blatchford, of course, yes. Michelle Mandel, of course. Thankfully, they're writing the columns as opposed to some young journalists who may not understand, first of all, the publication ban, who may not understand the nuances. But having said that, you're right. And I think the reason why you are hearing a screenplay is because of the lawyer for the defense. Now, yes, if you only have a smidgen to go on, perhaps you need to throw out something. But this individual from Germany that came here, his only relevance is the fact of they met in Germany, Mr. Magnotta's behavior in Germany that would go against any notion of him being not criminally responsible, and how, in fact, Magnotta was turned in, which is they were supposed to meet at a cafe. The German individual saw the poster, called the police, and that's how they arrested him. he's been cross-examined on his criminal record. Now, how does his credibility really come into play here when the only relevance of his evidence, in my view, is twofold as to what I said? So it becomes a circus.
And do you see this building up every day? Because you're watching this trial.
I'm watching this trial every day, and you know, there is a lot of criticism of his lawyer, who I've known for over 20 years. And if you believe what you read in the paper, and I do believe these columnists, I think the defense is almost throw as much mud as you can at the wall and see what sticks. And I think there is some real concerns about the defense here, and irrelevant cross-examination, in my view. And you have to recognize also that there is wide latitude in cross-examination. A judge does not want to stop a lawyer from cross-examining because the judge may not know what the full defense is. And that's one of the problems in the criminal process. And I like the right to fully cross-examine, but egos come into play. Lack of common sense may be there. Not being a mensch, which is Yiddish for being a good person and being classy. You don't need to throw out everything, and you need to appreciate everybody's desire for privacy shouldn't be at a price such as this, because this is such a notable trial.
How much privacy, Marcy, do you really think that the victim would have been able to sort of keep in terms of his family and obviously I understand where you're coming from, but in a trial like this, I mean, what could you reasonably expect the privacy borderline or the boundaries to be?
Well, as I've said, for instance, if the allegation is not that he died in the course of a sexual assault, and I suspect that may be quite difficult to prove with how the deceased was found in several parts. I'm not sure how relevant it is that they were going to have a sexual relationship. I just don't see it. And what I am saying is that the media lawyers, and this started with the Rob Ford search warrants and the uncovering of some of the details, which was unprecedented. I think you're going to see a growing trend of lawyers appearing before the court for more publication bans and more transparency. And I think there's going to be a lot more litigation in that regard. And I do think that there should be publication bans on certain pieces of evidence which the public need not know. I mean, how educated does the public really need to know in general when you can go on the internet every day and go from pornography site to pornography site? You can learn anything and everything you need to.
So, Marcy, what are you suggesting? Are you suggesting that this is being done, to just overload the jury with all kinds of information, so in the end they just can't find themselves clear to a verdict? Or is it to build a star out of certain lawyers in court? What is it?
Well, let me say this. You know, in the first 10 years of your practice as a lawyer, as a crown, you're still insecure in terms of what is important and what isn't. And there is a lack of trust sometimes between crowns and defense counsel. So at that point, you err on the side of caution and be more inclusive as opposed to exclusive. I think both of these lawyers, in excess of 20 years at the bar, there needs to be some more transparency. There needs to be more streamlining. I don't know why, such in this case, the evidence isn't going to be more streamlined to such an extent that the public need not, and the jury need not hear everything. And I see in this case that there is very little trust amongst the defense and the crown, and that's why there is so much coming out before the jury.
But to play the devil's advocate, I think you yourself have said that trying to get a verdict in this particular case, which is not criminally responsible, is difficult.
It is difficult, but as a defense counsel, you don't want to keep playing over and over and over again all the surveillance footage from at the apartment, at Charles de Gaulle Airport, going in and out of security. I mean, the more and more video you show of Magnotta looking normal and being able to maneuver certain things, the far cry you are away from NCR. So there needs to be some common sense, and this is a trial where I can see already common sense isn't at the forefront.
So where do you see it going? What are your fears?
My fears are this case is going to last a lot longer than anticipated. It's unfair for the jury. It's unfair for the deceased family. I think this could be a runaway show, subject to, of course, the judge, who I'm sure has a real handle on it. He's very respectful and very knowledgeable. But that's what I see happening. More and more irrelevant evidence coming out, more and more lengthy cross-examination that isn't necessary, and to what end? And perhaps it's to stay in the media.
And well, I imagine there's another entire layer of difficulty now with the prevalence of social media. I mean, things just take off even beyond what you'd normally have in terms of court reporting and reporters that are putting out a story.
Oh, I mean, every single newspaper in every country is reporting it, even to a limited degree. Right. And, I Googled him yesterday just to get some more information, and the first site that came up was still his website, which nobody has been on for a long time. But social media now is making news so prevalent, so available to everyone, and I hope there are not copycat situations now that people becoming educated.
It's frightening.
It is frightening. For instance, the fourth individual that got beheaded, the British, where there wasn't a lot of news about it. The next day, I think it was in Oklahoma or somewhere, where somebody beheaded somebody else outside the workplace. You haven't heard of that before.
No. Well, Marcy, you're going to continue to keep your eye on this for us, along with other legal issues that may surface. Thank you so much for joining us. Marcy Segal comes to us courtesy advocatedaily.com, our resource for all things legal. We will be back with much more on what she said on Canada Talks, Sirius XM.